Karen, can you get a little more dressed up, please?
Test.
Testing.
What's up, Joel?
Hey, Michael.
Christy, how are you? Christy's muted. She doesn't know it.
I know it.
Hold on. I don't know about y'all, but I'm getting a pretty steady stream of emails asking me to somehow open up the county and circumvent the governor.
Can't you do that?
Right after the steady stream of emails saying that we should circumvent the governor and close the county.
Oh, yeah, I had one lady tell me that the blood of the elderly would be on my hands when this was done. And I was like, Like, not even sure how I
Know
respond to
that
that.
we're live on the website right now.
3 dots up in the right corner. Oh, you're on mute.
So you got me now?
Yes.
Oh, God, I'm not doing this by myself anymore. Next time I'll take you up on the suggestion.
Does Brett know he's live? No, probably.
Well, Michael?
You didn't know you were live, did you?
Did I say a bad word? I don't think I did.
No, I think you're good. You're good. Robert, where are you at?
I know.
It's my
You're not gonna unmute. You where?
It's my workshop.
All right.
I have
It's just the roof. The roof behind you, I couldn't figure out what it was.
It's my grandchild's. I got a grandchild's birthday party in my backyard today, and I didn't think I could handle the in and out in the house or anything, so I came down to my workshop where my man cave to get away from everything.
Gotcha.
Live on.
Yeah. Okay, what time you coming? I'll be here by 9. Well, no, I'll be.
Hey, Michael, I didn't realize I was muted. I don't know if you heard me say or not. I'm in my workshop, my man
Yeah.
cave.
Yeah. Allison needs to change the camera, and all you can see is the big thermostat behind it.
I just want to know why she traded the Airstream office setup. That was pretty cool.
She was very well side lit always. So, yeah.
Now,
All right, about one more minute.
while we're waiting, I know we're live, but I'm going to say this in case anybody watching hears it. Michael, thank you for being willing to try to move that ZPA meeting next month or that hearing, but I understand Michael Kendry said we can't, so I'm trying to get that word out to everybody now that we cannot do that. So.
And when we start the meeting, you know, if you want to announce it either at the beginning or the end, feel free.
Okay. Because I did tell a few people that we were going to try to do that, so now I'm trying to get the word out. We can't.
All right, it is 6 o'clock. All 7 of us are here. I'm going to go ahead and start this budget workshop.
Uh-oh.
I'm sorry. I'm going to unmute you so that you'll be heard, and I'm going to switch the input to be able to see. My apologies. I know, I'm working on it. We got a second. 1 second. Now you'll be heard. Move back. There you go. 1 second.
Kevin, like, mute.
Technical.
Allison Sock, you coming in off a spaceship.
We had a momentary glitch here with,
You are still.
Getting a lot of feedback in that council room.
I have to go upstairs.
We're having a little technical difficulty.
Turn what?
I don't have a mouse or anything. I don't have a way to turn anything off or on.
Is that any better?
So do I mute and unmute me by this microphone?
It'll be okay.
Okay.
No, that they won't be able to hear her now coming out of there. We need to mute the audio. I can't hear them. The volume from this needs to be muted. Yeah. No, we're okay. We're okay. Can I talk now? Hold on 1 second. I think the answer is yes. Go ahead, try it.
Okay, we're back on. Can you hear me okay now?
So I can't.
We may have to.
All right. Can you hear me now, Michael? I can't. Michael, can you hear me now? Having a few difficulties here. If you want to start the meeting with the prayer and your normal, we can.
We don't normally do a worship. Yeah, that's right.
Can I go upstairs and just click on Zoom? You can. That doesn't sound right. No, it doesn't sound right.
Well, what she needs to do then to fix it is just do it on her phone, and you can do it up there, and where's the email? You can still do it from there, just click the link on your phone.
Oh my.
So where's the, if I'm gonna go look for the link on my phone, what's it gonna be?
Email from York County earlier today.
Who sent it? So different from Zoom?
York County. York County.
Okay, York County panelist, okay. What am I gonna click on? Am I gonna click on this May 4th date? What am I clicking on?
Which one do we click on?
Okay, David? You see one that says panelist?
Yeah, I got the email. Click here to join.
Which one's the name of your iPhone user? Is it for iPhone or?
Where you plug, what is it? VGA. Yep.
Is Kevin the one that's having the issue?
We're all having issues.
Well, I guess we can't all be great at everything.
Ironic that everyone who's not there is doing this great, but everybody who's there.
That is not lost on me, Chairman. I'm ready. I think if you are, we missed some of what you said earlier, but if you're ready for us to start, we will.
No, we can't hear him.
I know, what happened between now and then?
All right, we're trying one more time. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're ready to go on this end, but we did miss what you may have said. So are we ready to start now?
You are ready. When you're ready, take off.
All right, well, thank you. I feel like there's a lot of buildup now for what I'm going to say, but I will do my best to provide a brief summary introduction to our budget for this year. It's already started out as a very unusual year for us, and headed into this budget, both our schedule and the content of the budget are gonna be a little different than what you're accustomed to. We continues to be great uncertainty about the lasting implications of COVID-19. We think we've got a very good understanding of the short-term implications, but we just don't know how the economy is going to react, how long this will last, or if there's going to be any kind of prolonged recession that may affect our revenues that are largely development-driven. We have made several assumptions in the budget that you're going to hear tonight or discuss tonight. There's a potential impact on development-related revenues, and those have been adjusted to like a worst-case scenario. And those revenues primarily are building permit revenues, inspection fees, and deed stamps. So those vary greatly depending on how the economy and how our development is paced. We also will see an unprecedented decline in our hospitality tax revenues since the restaurants have not been open. They're open for takeout only. They do still pay tax on that, but it is greatly reduced. And then again, our long-term projections, if we have less development, we will see our growth of a mill be much slower than what we've seen in recent years. We have trimmed budget expenses significantly, and in an attempt to reduce the amount of fund balance that we need to offset the loss of revenues this year. In comparison to other budgets, fiscal year 21 will be a bare bones budget. We've made cuts in most areas, most departments, but with the intent to maintain county services in the near term. There are very few new positions in this budget. Any vacancies we see come that are included in the budget are the ones outside those under the control of elected officials will be scrutinized and will require county management approval in order to fill those vacancies. We have greatly reduced our travel and training expenses, and in an event, again, to reduce the fund balance appropriation. Fund balance appropriation this year is just scheduled to be just under $3.2 million for general fund operations. That represents less than 10% of our total fund balance. Our fund balance is in place just for times like this, and we can use that over multiple years if necessary to sustain the operations of the county. The use of fund balance reserves will likely be less if the impact of COVID-19 is less than the worst case scenario. We do have some contingency plans built into the budget if economic recovery is faster than what we expect, or for some reason we incur additional expenses that we have not budgeted for. As always, the departments have the ability to move funds within their own budget. County management also has a contingency account, and management can approve budget override for expenses that will exceed the amount we budgeted. One final thing I wanted to cover in my summary is reallocation of some expenditures in the millage in the general fund. So there are personnel expenses related to our insurance costs that have been reallocated from the general fund to be allocated to the sheriff and the solicitor. And that equates to about 1 mil in the general fund. 8/10 of that will be absorbed by the sheriff's office, and 2/10 will be absorbed by the solicitor's office. At this point, I'll ask Kevin to go into some more detail on a few specific county funds.
Good evening, everyone. First fund I want to talk about is hospitality tax fund. Before everything happened with the virus, we were projecting about $3 million in revenue in that fund. Right now, the budget is $1 million in revenue. In order to make our debt payment and everything associated with Project Riverbend, as well as fund the CVB, the $300,000 that they were scheduled to receive, we are going to use up pretty much all of our reserves that we had accumulated in that fund at this point. You know, the way things have progressed and the discussion of a second wave, you know, I have concerns about that $1 million being something we can meet. That's a very fluid situation, something that I expect, you know, I'd like to hear y'all's feedback on tonight is how we're approaching that fund, and if y'all feel comfortable with using the reserves as planned, or want to take a different approach with that particular fund. Another fund, the convenience centers and the MRF. The MRF is really, those expenses should be borne by the general fund. I went back and researched, going back to the 90s when Ann Hardy was the treasurer at York County, as to how we were handling recycling, and recycling was always meant to be a general fund expense. Right now, for instance, a portion, about a third or 40% of the cost in the convenience centers is borne by the general fund. The fund right now set up the millage that's in the unincorporated area to fund the recycling centers or convenience centers. It's not covering the expenses. The biggest driver in that is the recycling. We do have nothing in the budget for this year to address that, but next year we're going to need to deal with that. Again, the opening of the MRF, about $1 million of new expenses came online when we did that. Lake Wiley Park, that's another fund that we're going to see some changes in the budget, adding new personnel to that fund. That is a special tax district paid by that district. Those personnel were omitted from the first budget by mistake. They were put back in. We need those personnel to open that park up. So that will not impact anything outside the special tax district. The debt service fund, as y'all know, the auditor levies the millage for that. Right now, we're projecting there to actually be a decrease in the millage in that fund. It will be determined and finalized this fall. I don't think the value of a mill is going to drop lower than we have projected right now, so we should get to see a small decrease in that particular fund. Those are the funds that when I go through this budget that I look at that I think would garner some discussion tonight. We're going to get, and I'm going to turn it over to Andy to talk about the rural fire fund, as well as some of the other special tax district fire funds and that have changes in their millage, or he might want to discuss with y'all.
Good evening. Real quick, we're talking in the rural fire fund, a 0.4 of a mil increase. You'll recall last year when we have a substantial fund, or have had a substantial fund balance for a number of years there, and the idea was to spend it down and raise the millage over a number of years to balance it out to where we've got a manageable fund and a manageable revenue stream coming in there, and to be able to purchase capital equipment out of that fund balance to where it levels off to where it's more reasonable. So what you're looking at here in the rural fund is rural fire fund is a 0.4 of a mil increase. The purpose of this, we look to buy a new tanker chassis out of that, 2 new QRVs for personnel that we hope to add. We've recommended 4 full-time positions right now we have 4 full-time positions, and then 1 what's called PRN position that we are recommended be added to that budget. You'll see that Riverview has a 0.2 of a mil increase, looking to buy some equipment, upgrade, and replace some aging equipment. Bethel Fire Tax is at 0.4 of a mil, and Newport is at 0.2 of a mil. But beyond that, there are no changes in millage at any of the other tax districts.
Thank you, Andy. With all that said, do y'all want to start going through? You want to start with the general fund? Any questions we might can answer or need to address, or jump into the hospitality tax fund?
Anybody?
I'll speak up. I have a question on the MRF. We've talked in the past about starting to take recyclables from the other municipalities and having them pay something along the way. Where are we at on that, and how does that affect the losing that we have going on in recyclables and in that facility?
Right now, what we get for the revenue for the recyclings is probably 10% of what it was a couple years ago. It's just completely dropped off.
Yeah.
You know, I was contacted by Greenville County about taking some of their their recyclables over here. And honestly, the more we use that MRF, the quicker it's going to depreciate and wear down. I don't think right now that would be profitable and necessarily a wise thing to do. The way it stands right now with recycling revenues being practically nothing, that MRF is set up to lose, again, about $1 million a year. If recycling revenues go up, I don't think it will ever overcome that $1 million. It's just an expense, unfortunately, when the county made the decision to build that MRF. The day's coming where we're going to have to pay that tab. And again, we have that projected to be a millage increase in next year's budget to cover those expenses.
Kevin, what's the ratio of those expenses? What are those fixed compared to variable? Are those fixed costs?
Most of those costs are fixed cost. There's some staff added. I think there's 1 or 2 staff added to work at the recycling right now, but most of those are fixed costs to run the center. I think right now it's running at 3 days, going up to 4 days. So we're not at full capacity, but again, adding capacity, you're not going to add much revenue right now with the current prices of recycling. That could change down the road.
Not only that, it's not running currently. So for the last 2 months, we've not operated the MRF.
So reducing capacity doesn't really reduce the cost either?
No, sir.
Well, that seems like a bad position.
Well, recycling is a service we're providing, and really, to wrap my head around that, I've just accepted it as a service we're providing our taxpayers. It is certainly not going to be a moneymaker, and I do not believe in the near future we're going to come close to covering our costs. But again, it's a service we're providing our taxpayers.
Have we ever tried to figure out how much less we spend hauling stuff to the landfill in Richland County by doing this recycling? I mean, I know that's not a direct income, but that's got to be a little savings for us on that side.
Eric Rickett he's given me some numbers in the past. I can't tell you those off the top of my head. We do save some money by not putting that, on the trucks going down to Richland County. It's not that significant, but there is some savings in that.
Wasn't there a time several years ago when our recycling was turned a profit? I remember when David Harmon and I had a conversation years ago about recycling was able to make a few dollars.
This was before we opened the MRF, and when the money we got from recycling was substantially higher than it is now.
Gotcha.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good.
Okay, I appreciate what the staff's done with this in terms of the general fund, general countywide, not raising the millage. In fact, it looks like a 0.3 reduction in millage. I mean, certainly this is not the time to be raising taxes on any York County citizen. And what I see is the increase in special tax districts, that's per their own governing boards and what they feel they need,
Yes, sir.
mainly fire department issues. So I understand that. I know you and I talked a little bit about if we could give I mentioned a 10 or 15 to help people out, but of course, even if it was a practical thing to do, it's very insignificant when we consider 20% of the bill property taxes. It's not going to really make a big dent, but per your discussion with me about maybe considering like a $1 million general fund withdrawal as far as a loan for small businesses, and maybe have a small local bank like Bank of York administer it. I think that'd be a great thing to do for our small business people to be able to get those loans and try to work with them a little bit in the way things are going right now.
Yes, sir. And let me try to.
In York County.
I'll try to expand upon that to the rest of the council.
And am I not hearing well, or is everybody else hearing staff easily?
There's some cutting in and out on my end.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna make it, but it's kind of tough.
Okay.
So if I put my ear toward the monitor, it's just I'm just trying to hear better. And no, it's not old age; it's just a defective computer.
Yes, sir. I guess let me bring everybody to speed with the conversation Dr. Blackwell and I had in the last week. He called me up and asked if it would be practical to reduce for 1 year our taxes by a flat 10% or something along those lines. I told him I did not believe that would be practical. It would probably not have a positive impact on our credit rating, and recovering those mills would take a long time. I did share with him at that point in time something the mayor of York had reached out to me about as an idea. Would the county possibly consider taking some of our reserves and working with a local bank? And nobody's talked with Bank of York about this. They were just an example of a local bank to try to do some loan program for small businesses. And as I told the mayor of York, that is not something we're in the business to do. However, I would put that in the category of difficult, but if council desired to do something like that, that could possibly work, possibly, a lot of obstacles to be overcome in doing something like that. I don't think we want to loan money to businesses that recently opened or may or may not be viable after the fact. That was just really an idea that if council had a desire to pursue that, management would be willing to drill down into that and find out what all the obstacles specifically are and determine if there's a path forward on that.
And Kevin, if I could speak to that for a moment, I spoke with the mayor of York as well, and I reached out to my counterpart, the county commissioner of District 3 in Mecklenburg County, and talked about what they did and how they did it. And he gave me some details. I'm still trying to catch up with the county economic development director who actually runs their program for them. But back after 2008, after the Great Recession, as a council, they made the decision to move $2.5 million out of their general fund to put into a fund to start doing small business and micro business loans. And they partnered with a local lending institution. The council set up the parameters they were looking for, the applications, that type thing, working with that institution. And then that institution charges the county a percentage of each loan for loaning it and doing it. And they do it at, he said he believed a 3% rate is what the business pays the county back. But that was the little bit of information he was able to give me about what they did and how they did it.
Did that lender set the criteria for who would be eligible or not eligible and screen the applicants?
They screened the applicants, but he said the council set the criteria because they wanted it to be, they were trying to help people who did not qualify for some of the loans otherwise, which makes them a little riskier loan.
Okay. Again, that's an idea for council to entertain. If council would so desire, management can, again, further drill down into that and see if there's a path forward.
I would hope the council members would at least explore it as a possibility for small businesses concerning, based on whatever criteria that would be practical. I mean, just a way to help out small businesses and, like you said, more established businesses, not ones just starting up, but, just helping out the small guys a little bit.
And I hope to speak to their economic development director this week and get more information on it. And I'll forward what I can along to everybody when I get more information.
I have some questions about the, did I unmute me?
You're unmuted.
About the fire board increase. It looks like from the summary that you've given us, it's a 12% increase. And I think what I heard you say was is that a 0.4 mil increase?
Yes, ma'am, it is 0.4 of a mil.
Advisory. My questions have to do with, I know that we don't have a director there right now. Has the advisory board been involved in that? Are they aware of what these changes are? And ought we maybe need to consider waiting until we have somebody on board before we do that, if I'm reading that right, and that's an increase?
It is an increase, and we have discussed this with the advisory board. As far as waiting goes, As you know, that Emergency Management Director Chuck Haynes has been intimately involved in this process from the get-go. And really, this is a continuation of the plan that we had hoped to implement last year. That by and large, I think a number of the chiefs were in favor of. This is just taking it to this fiscal year. We've seen some success with this program, and we're hoping to expand the program. But to answer your question, yes, ma'am, it is 0.4 of a mil increase, and but this is an effort to level the fund out itself and spend down some of that fund balance. But the advisory committee is aware of this, and we talked to them, I think, about this a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now.
Did they approve, did they review and have input in the expenditures? Because the feedback I'm getting is that there's confusion with the fire chiefs and that they felt like they've been left out of it. But if that's been rectified, then.
I sent all of the chiefs, not just the advisory committee, but I sent them all an email outlining exactly what was going to be put into this budget, and then confirmed it with the advisory committee. That, again, because of virtually everything else that's going on, we're trying to be as lean as possible. But as you'll recall, the fund balance for the Rural Fire Control Board was significant. So the intent has been to develop a capital program over the next 5 years that will give us an opportunity to spend that down and level it off in such a way that we can maintain a healthy fund balance in there and not an excessive fund balance. And this is just a continuation of that plan that we had put in place last year.
So this is a $500,000 increase?
Total, yes, ma'am. It's $547,000.
And if I could add to that.
I have a couple other questions that I just want to make sure I get answered real quick, and I'll go ahead and get mine out of the way. I assume that the budget is set for such that the GEO debt is we're still planning to pay that off by 2024.
Yes, ma'am.
And on the $900,000 that we received in the increase in revenue due to the increase in the value of the mill, what I saw was a $300,000 increase in the tort insurance policy. Was that because of an increase at the state level, or is that just are we still the same?
The state significantly increased our tort insurance, workers' comp insurance, as we've also had an increase in the health insurance for retirees. Those are the three categories that, since the inception of the general fund with the sheriff and solicitor broken out, those three expenses had increased approximately 144%, or 44%, while the value of the mill had gone up 14%. Going through this year's budget, we had to sit down with the sheriff and solicitor and again iron that out. And they took the 0.8 and 0.2 of a mil, but keep in mind the sheriff, in addition to above the 0.8 of a mil he also got $292,000 of unfunded expenses. The solicitor got, I think, a little more than $70,000 of unfunded expenses. Those, again, are expenses that are passed down through the state that we have no control over. In total, our budget, we've got about $1 million right now in the general fund of expenses that before we did anything, we were given by the state.
$1 million in increased unfunded mandates?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I have a couple comments. My concern for the 0.4 of a mil increase for the firefighters, I don't have really an issue with the capital part of that. The personnel part of that, though, I do. I'm curious to know how did we benefit from those 4 firefighters? I've seen there were 4 that were hired last year. One of the my thoughts on that at that time was that we were going to be able to promote. I'm going to say promote from within, even though some of those firemen were maybe volunteers at in one of the fire tax districts. But we put some requirements on them that eliminated them from being able to apply for those jobs. So we really, in essence, we were not promoting from within. We ended up hiring from the municipal fire departments, I believe, for those positions. And I'm just unfortunately not up to speed on how those positions were divvied up, and I'm not sure that it's equal and fair for the people who are paying into a fire tax district and also paying for more personnel and firefighters that are not going to be they're not going to benefit from. And I understand being a donor district. I understand that firsthand. But I'd like to have a little more information on how we benefited from those 4 positions. And, you know, I don't understand. We have a separate EMS program, and I'm just curious why we put those same parameters on the firemen that were hired for those previous 4 positions. So I just have some question about that. The second thing is that I'm not in favor of, as y'all might imagine, I'm not in favor of using reserves for the CVB. I do think the hospitality funds are going to be very much reduced in spite of the restaurants really working hard to do as much business as they possibly could. I think those numbers are going to be drastically reduced. And you know, Chairman Johnson had even mentioned not having people pay those funds for March, April, and May, but we didn't mention that until the middle of April. So I don't think that's a possibility, and I don't think it matters because that money's collected specifically for that. But I would not be in favor of using reserves for the CVB, or I just don't think that's a proper use of that at this time.
Does council have a consensus on the hospitality tax budget at this point? Again, we give an overview. We've got basically about $2.1 million of expenses with $1 million of revenue, and we're planning right now to pretty much deplete our reserves at $1 million of revenue. Now, if the revenue comes in stronger than that, we'll do better, of course. You know, like I said, that's the fund that probably concerns me the most right now. How is that fund going to be impacted long term? You go back to 2006, I think it was, we're bringing in about $2.2 million a year in hospitality tax. It's grown wonderfully since then, but I don't want to go back to where we're barely covering our expenses. The desire would be to have that fund build up a balance that we can use towards phase 1 of Project Riverbend.
Kevin, if I can ask a question, you know, every year we've given different entities some of those hospitality dollars, and this year, I know normally by now we would have that list of folks. I'm sorry, the camera is right there, I think. But we would normally have a list of those folks, and are we going to forego that for this year, for this budget?
Management is recommending that we do forego the hospitality and accommodation taxes given for the market and advertising aspects of, you know, where that money went, particularly hospitality tax. Now, we are still recommending the accommodation tax money for the CVB be given to the CVB, but that would be it.
And Kevin, if I could ask, when you talk about the reserve, you're talking about the H tax reserves, correct?
Yes, sir, correct.
I guess if the question you're at, I think along the same lines as Allison, that we definitely need to look at that. Take a look and see if you have any other options. I will tell you, my biggest concern is that we're increasing the Rural Fire Board budget by $500,000, and I think that's putting a big strain on it. And I would much rather us have the person that's eventually going to be the director here helping to identify what additional expenditures need to go. My understanding is the call volume has gone down, and I think that that's a lot of money that gives us a big swing here. But I'll be happy to get more information from Andy and see what I'm missing.
Are we close to having a person that's in place? I mean, are we weeks away, or, I mean?
We're close.
We're close, okay. I mean, I just think that, I think we've floundered a little bit with fire departments over the past few years, and I think it's very important to me, but I think it's also very important to our chiefs that we get this right. And so I hate to make big decisions like that, just a little bit ahead of somebody being hired that would, I know budget season is here, but, you know, I think it's a big decision that somebody with a lot of expertise should weigh in on.
Yeah, and I would say that we are very close to, in the middle of the process to hire a director, and certainly those decisions would be made on who would fill those positions would be made by the new director. But to your point, the tax increase would be in place prior to. Now, we may have them on board prior to third reading. I'm not sure. It's a possibility, but we are very close.
Well, what do you think coming in? I was gonna say, even if we got a new director, what do you think coming in, he wouldn't be here long enough to be able to set a budget, just walking in the door? I think we should take the leadership and put in place what we think should work. And if he needs to make adjustments along the way, then obviously he's able to do that. But I think we need to go ahead and lay the groundwork for any kind of increase, decrease, or hold it steady with what we got.
Yeah, I mean,
I have some questions, and Andy, if we could virtually or however we need to, I'd like to meet with you and look at the numbers and get more of a better feel for the rural fire board increase.
I'll be at anybody's disposal.
Andy,
Yes, sir.
so we have four firemen that we hired last year, correct?
That's right.
And with this millage increase, this is for four more.
Yes, sir.
Is that
What we've
correct?
got right now is we have two-man teams that split their time between Oakdale and Bethesda and Hickory Grove and Sharon. So they'll spend a week kind of alternating between the east and west, for lack of a better term. The idea now is to concentrate efforts more to where we're not spreading the guys so thin. They're on pace right now to run nearly 300 calls or assist on 300 calls this year with departments from all over the county. The idea then would be to just double that effort and double the impact. So yes, sir, we have four now.
So the fire chiefs over the past year what's the feedback they've given you? How they like it now that they've had a year with it, or what kind of feedback are you getting?
Well, I mean, there's the feedback that we're getting is there's still some concerns about, where they are at any given time. I think the chiefs, by and large, are used to having their districts. They know where their volunteers or their paid guys are at any given time. And then what you may have in a situation is the county guys showing up and helping. They have been there not only to lend a hand and really even being first on scene on a number of calls, but they've also been in a position to where they've caught issues with equipment, been able to inspect things, help out from district to district and station to station. So aside from some growing pains, which I think is the best way to describe this, I think the feedback has been positive and to the point where we've gotten complimentary phone calls, we've got complimentary text messages. Hey, thanks for, catching this. These guys were great for us. So, but it's, again, this is anecdotal. I don't have anything I can provide you other than what I've heard.
Have you had any fire chiefs express strong negativity about it?
Strong negativity. Well, I think that
Let me just say negativity about it.
Oh, yeah. So I think most of the negative feedback that I have gotten from the chiefs is I don't know where they are at any given time. So the concern is you've got a chief maybe on the eastern side of the county and there's an incident and there's a thought that, well, they may be coming through 2 or 3 districts to come to my scene. And by my scene, I mean the scene on the eastern side. Well, we did. We had that issue. That was one of the kinks we had to work out, where we had the guys would come across 2 districts to go to help in another district, and we put a stop to that. Those are some of the bugs that have been worked out, and I think some of the feedback that we've gotten from the chiefs is, well, let's just get this perfect before we add on to it. And I think that we have worked through a lot of the bugs, but it's not a perfect system, but I think it's been so far an effective system. I think it has saved lives. It has certainly saved lives and property. And I think that just the addition of these crews is only going to help, and it's going to lessen volunteer fatigue. These guys are paid to run calls, whether it's an alarm call or a smoke alarm call or whatever that we know is bogus. They're paid to run that call, and we're not taxing our volunteers to do that when we paid guys to do it.
So did I hear you say that the fire chiefs kind of want the bugs to be worked out of the 4 that we have right now before you add to it, or did I misunderstand what you said?
No, I think you asked me specifically what are some of the negatives that we have heard, and I think that's one. I don't know that that's the consensus. I would be surprised, certainly, if that is the consensus. amongst chiefs that we want to get this system perfect before we add anything to it, because right now we do not have a perfect system. And we can't expect a perfect system. We can just continue to learn and grow with what we're doing, but the effectiveness of the 4 guys that we've seen in the field to date has been, is inarguable.
And Andy, where do you foresee the future for firefighters?
What I would like to see personally, just based on some of the demographic data, is you take the 2 new crews and dedicate them to the western part of the county, kind of a northwest and a southwest portion where they can help in the Clover, Bethany, Santiago area, one in the Hickory Grove southern part of or the southwest part of the county, and then dedicate the other 2 crews to the southwest or southeast part of the county that is largely uncovered with paid personnel.
So another one of my concerns again is that we're paying for this. We've got a fire department that has a 5 mil cap, and I think we should have put some effort into raising that to a 10 mil cap, so that those taxpayers, in other words, I'd rather max out some of the taxpayers in individual areas before I would, make these other departments that have a lot of expenses pay for that. So if we've got a department, most of the departments are 10 mils, but if we've got departments that are 5 mils, then we need to be getting that on a referendum so that the people that live in those areas can vote to afford more of their own fire departments. Firefighters, simply because, if we added 4 last year and we're adding 4 this year, which was what my concern was going to be last year when we added the 4, and we were told they were going to go to a couple of specific fire departments, and I'm not sure that they actually went to those fire departments. So we are, again, it's a tax district versus a rural overall issue, in my opinion, and I don't want to slight anybody when it comes to fire service and public safety, but I think we need to look at this as a bigger umbrella of the county. And again, I'm just going to say that I would really like for somebody to be here and be making these decisions that I just want somebody that I can feel really comfortable with and confident in these decisions, because I don't foresee Bethel getting the fire department, getting any of these folks, but we are. We're self-funding a fire department, but we're not benefiting from an increase of, $500,000 increase, countywide.
I will echo some of those sentiments regarding, I'd like more information on this 5 mil increase and how that, and what that looks like. I will say this though, I think this is kind of a fundamental difference I have with Ms. Love. We've had this debate before. I truly believe it is the role of the county to make sure that every fire department is able to respond to every call all the time. And I realize that we're spreading this tax across the county, and so people in unincorporated Fort Mill, people in Lake Wiley are paying this so that Oakdale can operate. But if Oakdale can't operate properly, then that money needs to come from somewhere, and we need to make sure that every fire department has whatever it needs to respond to every call all the time. Now, whether that fire, no matter where you are in the county, it should not matter. And I think that's ultimately, we need to make sure that's our driving force in this. And if this increase just to add 4 more firefighters doesn't accomplish that, then we don't need to do it. But I think if it does, we need to get very serious at it. And I totally get we don't want to go to a countywide system. I've heard that argument before, but I think we have to try to make sure that no one is getting inferior service just because they can't afford it. And I will say, I do agree with Allison. I am worried about all of this using general funds for the H-tax. That concerns me. I'm more concerned that depending on what this fall looks like, restaurants might see an even greater hit in the fall, and how long that'll last into next year. I think we need to be very careful how we move forward using HTAX and especially spending down literally all of its reserves. That concerns me.
All right, I've heard three people express some concerns. I'm just going to throw this out there as a suggestion for council to think about. If we adjusted the budget and sort of took a wait-and-see approach with the hospitality tax funds for the CVB, if the revenue are coming in stronger than expected, then we can fund the CVB. It's basically $75,000 a quarter that we're giving them. If revenues are not coming in strong, then we would not fund them. That's just a suggestion to put out there, having heard from 3L on that. But again, it's council's decision, but I've heard three concerns at this point.
I'll say that I don't want to end the funding of CVB. I don't want to just turn off that spigot and they're dead. But certainly, if we look around and we say to ourselves that large sporting events, large tourism activities will not happen at all this year, then the CVB shouldn't need as large a budget. Because what they do is they contribute to those types of events. So that money should never have to be spent. And so I think what we need to do is coordinate with them and determine what is or isn't going to happen in York County over the next 18 months and start backing out some of that funding that would have gone to those specific events. And I'm not talking about shutting them down and there's no CVB. That would be a mistake, I think. But we do need to start accounting for what is actually going to happen in York County and what is not from a tourism standpoint.
Kevin, I'm a big supporter of the CVB, and I think we need to look at it closely. I do believe they have cut a lot of their expenditures because of that. There's nothing, they're not spending on marketing or getting things right now because they can't. So I think they've cut expenditures. This is one of the concerns I had, and I'll bring it up with tying up all the money that we did to buy that 1,900 acres. And one of the reasons I voted against that, because we were basically taking everything to pay for that and not leaving much for any contingencies if something happened. So I don't fully support penalizing the CVB because of our oversight in spending all of our money and tying it up for a project that we did that they had no input or control over.
If we can also get just information, I know that he's done a great job of getting resources. Billy with the CVB has been able to get a lot more income from those other sources, is being able to just make sure that, similar to what Chairman Johnson said, is just taking a look at it, opening the books up, and let's see what's really needed, so that we don't put other areas in jeopardy of not being able to have some revenue.
And they have not gotten a lot of those sources from the hotels that they had planned on getting, because hotels aren't booking any rooms, just like we aren't getting the accommodation tax. So they've had a cut on that side as well, where they were thinking they were going to be making up some revenue from that. And that's not happened because, again, nothing's happening in tourism or hotels or anything much.
I think Kevin might have said it best. I mean, we're just going to have a measured response, and it's a little uncertain. I agree with Robert about the importance of the CVB, but I can't say it better than Kevin said it. We just kind of have to measure the response and see how we can maneuver this.
I think there's some unknowns. I think the number one unknown is how much money is going to come in the revenues. I think there's kind of a downtime, and if it's, they're kind of like my business right now. I'm saving a lot of money because I don't have employees and I don't have expenses going out that I would normally have. But there is also going to be a little time of recovery after this, and you can't stop marketing because you lose ground. So I think what I would like to know from the CVB is what is their, I don't know, and maybe it's in this, I don't know where that budget comes from, but how has their budget changed percentage wise, and how do we apply maybe what we're going to determine to that, so that they are left stranded, but know that we do have a little bit of time that is kind of downtime for them. I know, just we need to kind of match those things. And Kevin, maybe you can work and see what that budget is, and maybe you already have. But I would just be interested to know, and how their budget changed. The county manager says that we've cut back on our training and our trips and things like that. And I'd like to see that, has the CVB also done that? How streamlined and tight have they gotten their budget? And then let's try and match what we're doing with what they've done.
I do believe, Billy, and I don't think I've ever opened up the email, but Billy did send me last week, I believe, their budget. I haven't had a chance to go through that yet. I would like, and this is something I want to put out there now for the council, and I apologize for the crazy workshop schedule right now, to see if the meeting on the 11th, if it works for everybody and everybody's fine with this, to have the nonprofits, including the CVB, come to present their budgets and their particular request. Again, right now we have the CVB scheduled for the same $300,000 that they were planning to get, and we've kept all the other nonprofits at the same funding they had in the previous year. But if that works for everybody on council, we will get in touch with those organizations next week and see if they can make themselves available to participate in our Zoom meeting for the workshop on the 11th. And, Billy does a great job of communicating with you all, and he can go through and explain how everything's come in or not come in. I will say this, in discussion with Billy, the money from the hotels came in very strong for their fiscal year 20. I think he told me that they actually achieved their budgeted numbers for that, but of course they did fall off dramatically when the virus took place over here. So I think going forward, he's going to have a strong revenue stream coming in from the hotels, and particularly with, the new sports center up and running in downtown Rock Hill. I think their future is going to be very strong financially, but I do want to be measured in how we spend our reserves down, particularly in that fund, because I never want to put ourselves in a position where we're forced to use a debt service millage to make payments on the land. And I will say this: I certainly don't regret the purchase of the land. While it did make up, maybe about 60% of our projected revenues going forward, I think that land will benefit the county for the rest of the for generations and generations. I don't think Robert was trying to say he's against the land, but it did put us in a bad position with this virus coming.
Kevin, I appreciate that. I was just about to make a suggestion that we hear from Billy on this, and I'll add to the pot of concerns. My other concern is that we're not hamstringing their ability to help the county bounce back once we come through this, and that they have the proper funds where they can bid on different events to come in here for next year. Because I think they're kind of a year behind with how they work, but we need to talk to Billy about that. But I want to make sure that they have every ability to help bring in events and those tourists into the county as we bounce back from this, and help our hotel owners and our restaurant owners recover as well. So it would be great to hear from him and hear his thoughts on that.
Everyone, our goal was to run about an hour. We're about at the 7 o'clock mark. I think everybody has pretty much been heard from at this point. If you have anything else, now would be the time to kind of throw it out there so that it can be addressed next week at our next meeting, and that everybody knows that what's coming at that next meeting.
I have two quick things, if I could, Michael.
Oh, yeah.
First, Andy, is there a report? You mentioned that the new paid firefighters and run probably are assisted on probably about 300 calls. Is there a report we can see on where they assisted and where those calls were?
Sure, I'll be glad to pull some CAD data for you, and we can work through that.
All right, thank you. And Kevin, on page 4 of the budget message, do you have the notebook in front of you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm just looking at the chart when we look at commercial property, and you're showing the change in the tax bill for commercial property at the top half. With the general millage and stuff, we show a decrease of $9 for the commercial property owners. Then we show the rural fire board, the waste, solid waste, and recreation on there, and then we still show a decrease of $6 on the total unincorporated area under the commercial property. And I believe that should be a slight increase on that, just as it is on the owner-occupied home. It's an 80-cent increase when you add in all the rural fire board and stuff. So I think that is a typo of some sort on that chart there.
I think you have, and I'm I'm struggling to read this on in print right now. I'm going to go with dark lighting, not my age. In the incorporated area, we have an overall decrease, and that's driven by the projected drop in the debt service fund. We do have a corresponding increase in the unincorporated area coming across of $500,000. So, and this is to Robert's point, it should be, and I'll go through and check, I got a formula obviously mixed up, that 0.2 of a mil should equate to an overall increase, and 0.2 of a mil is going to be 80 cents, $1.20 for every 100,000 of commercial property is what that would equate to. So in the grand scheme of things, we're not talking about a lot of money, but it is an increase in the unincorporated area. And I will get that sheet updated, make sure the formulas are working, and send a properly updated one out to everyone. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, I just want to make sure if we've got the public viewing this and stuff, and we're looking at it, that, you know, obviously there's a decrease overall on the top part of that chart, but when you go to the fund millage on the unincorporated area, it still shows we got a $12 increase for the fire board, $3 for the solid waste, and then we're showing a $6 decrease in total taxes. So I think the math's off a little bit somewhere there. So it should show a slight increase. It's not a very big one, but it should show a slight increase.
Yes, sir, and I think it's the signs just got switched on that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to belabor the meeting. I know we've had a long day, but the one thing that I did not ask, the first page of the budget message, you have bolded the 15 and 3% increase on water and sewer rates in the city of Rock Hill having negative impact on the county. Is that something that translates into the budget for this year?
Yes, ma'am, that had a negative impact in the budget of about $750,000.
Okay, I'll be happy to follow that up at our next meeting. I know we've been meeting a while, and I'll get some more details from you.
When is that increase?
July 1st, is it?
I believe it's July 1st. I'm not certain though, but I believe so.
So y'all don't even want me to say on screen how I feel about an increase on water rates right now, because a 15% increase on water and sewer for county residents is probably a 40 to 60% increase on Blue Granite water customers. So that is absolutely just, I mean, it's just, and I mean, they just reduced their utility fees. I'm happy about that because I have a business in the city of Rock Hill, but this all but makes up for anything they were trying to do that was a positive there.
Anybody else? I definitely would like us to hear more about the Rock Hill increase. We do need to discuss that.
Yes. And Michael, if you don't mind, you said I could make a comment about my zoning, my ZBA meeting. If anybody's watching out in the Bethany area, the western side of the county, that's been calling me about Whitworth Road and a zoning meeting out there, I had told some people that I was going to try to have that zoning, that ZBA meeting or that particular hearing changed because internet service is basically non-existent, and so they're probably not watching the Zoom meeting either. But if they are, that meeting cannot be postponed according to our county attorney. So they will need to call the county zoning department at 803-909-7278 if they have any questions about what's going on with that Whitworth property. They can help them answer that, and they do need to try to see how they can get on that Zoom meeting to be able to express their concerns.
Robert, what was that number again? I've had calls about that also.
803-909-7278 is county zoning, and so, that's where it says for people to call if they have questions on their zoning.
That's on that event. Is that on that event venue? Is it an event? So what else I've had several calls about that. So can they email you, or do they email the ZBA, or what do you think on that?
Michael Kendry in his email suggested they talk to planning and zoning. The only person who can postpone it is the applicant, and it doesn't seem like he has any willingness to do that. But that if they talk to the zoning staff my understanding is that those comments can be forwarded from the zoning staff to the ZBA and stuff. So I would say they're welcome to send them to me. I'll forward them, but I would say, you know, if they can call that number or contact them directly, that might be better than trying to do it secondhand.
Okay. Good information on that.
Mike,
Anyone else? Go ahead, Brett.
and this popped in my head for recent discussion, but when is the Baxter Convenience Center? When is the lease up on that?
It's a 2022 lease, but you got to remember, and I think we've discussed this before. You know, the environmentals that will need to be, the remediation, for lack of a better term, on the property that they're at now will precipitate the closure earlier than the end of the year. We'll probably have to close it, I think, in October, November to do some work cleaning it up, but 2022.
So that's not in part of this budget. It's not anything in this budget directed at that.
There's a capital expenditure for, I believe, the acquisition of a new site and then some money towards the construction of a new site. And that's a topic that myself, Mr. Hudspeth, and Andy were discussing before this meeting, that, you know, management plans on drilling down to a little bit more, because if you're looking at spending, you know, potentially $4, $5, $6 million on a site and to build a site, is that the most cost-effective way to serve the citizens in that area?
Okay.
Anybody else before we do this again next week? All right, I think everybody has kind of given their input. David, Kevin, we would ask that you all get us those answers and certainly be responsive to any council members this week. And we will do this again. I will say that I want to make sure that when we have our public hearing on the budget, that we are back in council chambers and that we are doing this where everyone could have the ultimate, you know, the best way to have access. So my hope is that we are in council chambers for our first meeting in June. Anybody have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
So move.
There's a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.